What happens when two of the most plugged in people in digital care team up to help you make sense of the chaos? Welcome to Control Plus Care. I'm Michelle Corrigan.
I'm Katie Thorn.
This is the show where we give you a weekly briefing on the most important digital care updates. From AI to inclusion, we're unpacking what you need to know this week in under 30 minutes.
And today, for our inaugural episode, Michelle, we're going to talk about a recent speech that Michelle Dyson, the Director General of Social Care for the Department of Health and Social Care, gave, talking all about the power of technology to transform care and adult social care. But first, how are you doing? How's your day?
Good. Yeah, no, not bad. Another busy week. I keep promising myself that the next week things are going to slow down, and yet to be proven right.
Is this because you've been saying the dreaded Q word and then been proven wrong?
Yeah, I don't know why I think summer's always going to be a quieter period. It never, ever is. But how's your week going?
Also busy, a little bit of travel, getting to be over in the East Midlands this week, which will be exciting. But yeah, going well, thank you.
Okay, well, shall we get started? Because we had promised today that we were going to talk about the 10-year plan. But obviously we've derailed that.
Yes, and I think it is for a good reason. The NHS 10-year plan is probably the most important policy document for health which has come out in recent times. There's lots in there. I think we're definitely going to do a deep dive on it next week, particularly the digital chapters. But you sent this speech from Michelle Dyson over to me this morning, Michelle. And given that it's really talking about technology, it's talking about social care, it felt a little bit more relevant for our audience right now because there's something actually concrete in it, as opposed to us sort of saying the NHS is planning to do this and this is how we think it might impact social care.
Absolutely. And do you know what? When I saw it this morning, I was just so glad to see a topic that you and I obviously are deeply embedded in and deeply passionate about. You know, somebody else making the case on stage. And, you know, we're going to talk through some of the things that came out of it. But I was thrilled to see it even talked about.
Yeah, absolutely. And of course, we are going to share a link to where you can see the entire speech and also where you can read a transcript, which will be in the show notes at the end. So I'll pick out some of the details sort of which are possibly more relevant to care providers. But before we get into that, the bit I found really astonishing when I was reading this is actually in the intro, where it says that even 2 years ago, pensioners were the most active users of the NHS app over all other population demographics. And I know I talk a lot about sort of technology and care, as do you, and people always go, oh, old people don't want to use tech. But what an amazing fact to see that that's actually not the case, and especially with the NHS app.
Absolutely. I mean, I still see initiatives talking about silver surfers and getting older people online, but the truth is they're already there. They're already active. So that stat is brilliant. You know, the NHS app has big ambitions to get all of us online. And with older people leading the way, just goes to show that social care is really there.
Yeah, exactly. And, you know, we had the Digital Inclusion Action Plan, which was published by the government earlier this year as well, which we do recognise that there are some people who need a little bit more support to access technology, particularly to get online. People in rural communities especially sometimes really struggle. So there is more to do. But I think that old sort of thought of people who are over 60 would never want to go on the internet is just sort of dead in the water nowadays.
Yeah, and it's really nice that that's been recognised, because if we keep making efforts where we've already made progress, we just don't get anywhere.
Yeah, exactly. So into the sort of crux of the speech and what was being talked about. It is a little bit older person focused, this speech, as it was given at the Institute of Gerontology, but there are sort of lots of carry across for all adult social care here. And really, Michelle's making the case about how much change has already happened in the last 3 years in the social care sector when it comes to digital transformation. It's called in the speech, the quiet revolution. People have just been cracking on with adopting digital tools at a really astonishing rate. So it's 10% increase in the use of digital care records year on year for the last 3 years. Before that, it was only 3% of organisations as a growth rate. So that's massive. And the July stats for DSCR uptake, digital social care record uptake, have just been published, and 77% of all CQC registered care providers are now using a digital care record of some sort, which if you think back to sort of 2021 pre-COVID, it felt like it could absolutely never happen. So that's been just absolutely game changing.
I mean, it's interesting that it's called the Quiet Revolution, and you and I never shut up about it.
Yeah, that's true. But we never shut up about most things, to be honest.
Fair point, fair point.
Yeah. But I think as well, if you think that was done with relatively little funding and little fanfare, you know, £150 million over 3 years for adult social care. I mean, we're very pleased to have had funding, of course. I think everybody who's really gone out there, made the most of resources, really sort of embrace this whole digital revolution, should just give themselves a massive pat on the back for the huge progress.
Absolutely. And do you know what's been really nice to see is people talk about digital transformation and adopting digital systems as a hugely expensive thing. And you and I know from talking to providers that, you know, with limited resources, with a little bit of ingenuity, they've been able to do it in a way that absolutely culturally embeds it, but at the same time doesn't cripple the resources of the service. And I think that ability to do more with less has really benefited the sector in this kind of adoption of digital tools.
Yeah, absolutely. And also another thing which Michelle Dyson pulls out in the speech is the fact that social care, in terms of technology, was very much a greenfield site. You know, a lot of people were moving from paper to digital systems. We're not having to deal with all of the legacy software that they deal with in the NHS, in primary care. So really, we could kind of go in straight from the off, work with apps, with mobile first technology, and kind of leapfrog some of those older systems, which are much, much harder for people to use.
I think people absolutely don't appreciate how difficult it is to transition from an existing system to a new one. And we have really benefited from the fact that, you know, 4 years ago when I came into this role, people were saying to me, well, we're not digital, we're not really, you know, online as such. So when they've been implementing things, they've been able to make decisions that are based just on what is the best thing for us and the best thing for the care we deliver, as opposed to, well, we would do that, but then we've got these 16 laptops that actually won't work on that system. And we've got to keep, you know, in the NHS, it's always, we've got to keep this MRI machine on and it works on, I don't know, MS-DOS. So we've got to still put the tapes in the Commodore 64 to keep the x-ray going. We don't have those problems in social care, so it really has meant when we're adopting systems, we're adopting the best things and the best fit. And that's so exciting.
Yeah, really, really exciting. And it's also been, you know, so much adoption of new forms of technologies. We've seen a huge growth in things like remote monitoring, like home sensors, consumer technology as well being used more and more. I cannot tell you the number of particularly supported living and domiciliary care services who are using Amazon Alexas or Fitbits with the people that they're supporting to really make sure people are sort of being kept staying independent and also supported in a way which is meaningful for them. And of course, then we have the AI revolution. We're doing a lot of work on AI. I'm sure we'll come on to that in a lot of depth in many of the episodes of this podcast. But one of the things which I had like a moment, like flutter of panic when I read this speech about, because as you know, Michelle, I'm very worried about automation and potential impacts on people. There is a reference to Wigan Council using AI to automate care needs assessments. And I had a moment of being like, oh God, what does that mean? Because obviously there are some real risks when we don't have human oversight, I think, into the decisions which is being made by like machinery. But then I went away and I read the full case study, which is written up on Local Government Association's website. And actually, it's a really powerful case study. They're not taking humans out of doing care needs assessments. They're not doing sort of just an automated checklist that people need to do. It's more around sort of using transcription software to record a meeting like we're having now, I guess. And then sort of having that to support completing a care needs assessment form automatically off the basis of a natural conversation between two people. And I could absolutely see how that could sort of speed up the administrative tasks without taking that real like human professional input, which needs to be there to make sure that somebody's care needs are being met.
That's so interesting. And you're right. I think both of us have had the heebie-jeebies about the idea that we just automate everything. We just, you know, churn out care plans based on what data, who knows, and that, you know, ultimately people aren't involved in that process. But I say this all the time. The really unique thing about social care is that we are an industry of human empathy. We cannot deliver good care without humans in the process. And that the real skill is in the discernment, is in the ability to look at the information that, potentially an AI system churns out and say, this isn't quite right, or this doesn't really reflect, it may, if we've got ambient kind of auditory monitoring, it may have captured the words, but it hasn't captured the spirit. It hasn't captured what the person actually meant. It hasn't overcome some of those limitations people have in language, and an LLM is not equipped to deal with people with English as a second language, with people who are from very particular communities. I will tell you, anything that is around transcribe and auditory is always going to get my accent wrong every time. There are just certain words, it's like, she said something. Tech's not there yet. So I'm all for anything that reduces the administrative burden, because guess what? Few care workers are in this because they love admin. Very few. But we just need to keep the people in the process, because that's what keeps the care of a high quality. It's what does people a real service. It keeps dignity in the care that we deliver. The more we automate it, the more risk there is there. So the Wigan Council example, I'm really pleased it does keep that, but I am still kind of holding my breath a little bit as it gets rolled out more widely and people have bigger and better ideas on how we can automate it more.
Yeah, absolutely. I think we'll probably use this podcast a little bit to have a bit of a watching brief on what's going on, keep people up to date around it.
Yeah, absolutely.
And speaking of the future, as we sort of were, so that's obviously sort of what the end of this talk is about. So, this is set the scene, the huge progress we've already made. But really, what is important is what's coming next in terms of the digital journey for social care. And I think for all of us to have a little bit of clarity around that is just really, really helpful. It helps us make our business plans. It makes us think through what our strategy is going to be ourselves as organizations. So obviously we are waiting for the Casey Commission to get started. I think a lot of these things may change depending on the outputs of it, which is 2027, I want to say, Michelle.
3 years.
3 years. 2 years, potentially. We'll see. And that is sort of something for us to bear in mind. But the things we do definitely know is the future direction of travel is very much around supporting people to stay at home for longer in their communities. There's a lot of talk about neighborhood health hubs, supporting people to live in their own space for as long as possible. And technology is going to play a really, really key part in that. There's been already announcements at the beginning of this year, back in January, that the government is going to develop new care technology standards for a broader range of technologies, which hopefully can help with some of that assurance about what's safe, what can we recommend, what is actually supporting people to a high standard. And I think that's something that we're really, as a sector, going to have to keep an eye out for, get involved with consultations, make sure we're sharing best practice and what's really working. So there's a lot of opportunity there, both in the sort of specialist assistive technology, care technology market, as well as people purchasing their own sort of technology at home. So,
I think on that one, what I'd say to anyone listening to this is make sure you have your say, because the reality of how these things are being rolled out, some of it is truly transformative and things that I've never thought of, but organizations are doing. I'm really interested in this shift of supporting people at home. And I think, when we're looking at the future of things we should be talking about, technology and delegated healthcare tasks go hand in hand. And I think that's going to be a big part of that agenda. And what that looks like, we can't even imagine right now. But I hope that it's done in a way that, again, upskills our workforce, because that's what we want to see, but also keeps in mind that we are connecting systems, because if we are delegating healthcare tasks, if we are putting more health at home, then the healthcare system needs to get closer to social care. And I think we're on our way, but, I want to see us do more.
Yeah, I think that's really, really important. And I think as well, when we're talking about technology to support people at home, have individuals having that choice, that control over what technology is used as part of their care is going to be increasingly important. It's already important now, but it's going to become much more real day to day. People need to feel empowered and supported by the technology which is right for them, and not just be given sort of a piece of equipment because everybody's been given the same piece of equipment which doesn't work for them. So I think it's going to be a large role for us all in the sector to be just keep yelling about personal choice and how important that is.
And the point I'm going to make is about data.
Yeah.
Because with all of this technology comes reams and reams of data. So, are we giving people a transparent explanation of what happens to their data? Are we giving them options? How do people withdraw from that system? And obviously, the very bedrock of it all, are we doing it in a secure way? Are we exposing ourselves to more cyber risk by putting systems in people's homes who may not have the level of cyber hygiene that an organization, a residential, or a hospital will have? We need to kind of keep all of this in mind so we don't get kind of carried away with the excitement of the possibility. Like, I am all for secure by design, and I want to make sure that we are kind of pushing for that in whatever is developed.
Yeah, absolutely. And the other piece of sort of tech, which I was really pleased to see in here, because it's a bit of a personal, podium moment for me, is electronic medication administration records, which are so important. There is so much peer-reviewed academic evaluation of the benefits of eMAR systems, about the way that they can massively reduce lots of polypharmacy, for example, massively reduce medication errors and mismanagement and misses. I think if that is going to be a focus in the future, and it's just a passing reference in this speech, it could make a real huge difference for people, especially in nursing homes. I think it's going to be something which could be really, really important to think through more about medication management and what we're doing there.
One day, Katie, we write our book about how eMAR killed the fax machine. I think, that is a page turner. So you hear to hear first, guys, if any publishers are interested. Because it really was transformative, and it's so unsexy and so low key. But if you talk to particularly a care home manager who was wrangling multiple GPs, multiple pharmacies, how eMAR has transformed their system and saved them hours and hours and hours a week. Yeah, I'm a big fan.
This is it. My absolute dream is that every care home in the country has an eMAR system which links automatically with their GP and with their pharmacy, and all of the medications are on there. And when you have a repeat coming up, it automatically pings over to the GP for approval, which pings to the pharmacy, who then lets you know when that's all been ready to be collected or to be sent to you. And the hours of calling around or emailing is just gone, because it's happening automatically. You can have remote pharmacy medication reviews for people to make sure that everything's right. I just think it would be such a game changer and make things much safer for people. So fingers crossed on that one. And so the sort of final part of the speech is and what's government going to do about it, which is, something we're always keeping an eye out for at Digital Care Hub. What's the role of central government? Obviously, the point had to be made that they do not have unlimited resource. So I don't think it's likely we're going to have sort of a sudden influx of cash coming into the sector. But there are other sort of commitments which are being made about what is going to happen around digitization. So Michelle talks about having a clear vision and guidance for the sector. Some of this was announced back in January about what the next steps were going to be for digitization in social care. And one of the key areas which we knew about from January, which has been reiterated here, was that developing new standards and new assurance mechanisms for technology used in social care is really going to be next sort of steps from central government, and where they really see their role in terms of making sure that the technology we're using is safe and at a certain standard, and really removing that burden from individual care providers. Like, we don't need 18,000 odd individual care organizations all asking the same assurance questions to the 20 technology companies that we're using. So actually that could be something which would be really a bit of a game changer.
I think that's actually brilliant, though. I mean, I personally feel a lot better choosing something if someone says, here's the best version. And I don't know many care providers who look at a specification of a software or, the technical specifications of a piece of hardware and are like, yep, I can choose between the two. So that is absolutely the place for government to be coming in and saying, look, we've set the standard. You can buy better, you can go more, but here's what you will know is safe, what is secure, and also what's usable and does what it's supposed to, because that's the other thing we find all the time. And technology salespeople, not to disparage our colleagues in the sales industry, sometimes bend the truth, or it will be able to do this next year, or we're working on developing X, Y, and Z. Ultimately, we want to know that what it says on the box is what you're getting delivered. So I'm really excited about that.
Yeah, exactly. And then the other sort of bit which comes alongside this, so if you've got assured software systems, it's also important that the regulator, so CQC, is aware of that. Obviously, CQC doesn't regulate technology and software, and we wouldn't want them to, but they do need to sort of be able to inspect and see where best practice around technology is being done. And so that's something which I think is going to be quite important going forward, is where inspectors are expecting to see technology being used to support people and to really make sure we're meeting all of the sort of things in the framework as well. So that would be good.
Yeah, I think the thing about CQC is it is really important that we have inspectors who are as up to date as our providers. So, as that transformation happens in social care, it has to be happening in the inspectorate at the same time. So I'm glad to see that mentioned.
Definitely. And it's something that you've mentioned as well a couple of times already, Michelle. But learning and development is going to be really important on this. The tech space is growing so fast and changing incredibly rapidly. There's new things which are coming out all of the time. And so we need to make sure that the workforce is being given the sort of skills and training to keep up with that. So there's a commitment to invest in digital skills. This was a speech to the Institute of Gerontology, so there's not a number associated with that, but we obviously will be keeping an eye out for what that looks like.
Absolutely. I'm passionate about, we talk all the time about getting our staff digitally enabled, getting them digital skills. I would say, again, another example of where the job is largely done. We have a digital workforce, but digital changes and the expectations of people changes, and we want to be keeping people up so that it's a development opportunity for individuals, but also so that we are getting the most out of the technology that we're introducing. There's absolutely no point rolling something out that your care workers can't work.
Yeah, exactly. And especially as sort of the landscape we already know is going to change. So there was also an announcement about having a centralised data infrastructure in social care, moving towards having a social care, shared care record integration more with the NHS. All of that is going to mean that we're going to be having to think about not just our own digital systems, but integrating into the wider health and care economy and what that means in terms of our technology we're using in services.
I can't wait to get my hands on that central data infrastructure and see what's in there. Like, I think using data to make decisions is so exciting.
Yeah, absolutely. And then the final little bit to wrap up this speech, because we do like to talk about funding where it's available. So there is also mention about funding flows, not sort of where the figures will be, but sort of indicators that central government are really looking at how digital can be embedded in existing funding. So thinking about things around pooled budgets between NHS and local authorities, potentially thinking about innovation funds or broader investment opportunities for the private sector. So some sort of glimmer of hope that there'll be some money for this.
And we will be keeping our eye on that very closely.
Exactly. So that was Michelle Dyson's talk. I hope that that was sort of a bit of a rush through, but hopefully helpful for people. And so just to sort of round up our main news items for this, we've got some new artificial intelligence guidance as well, which has just been published, which we wanted to talk about. So we were commissioned last year by the Department of Health and Social Care to run some workshops with care providers to talk about responsible use of AI. We co-developed some guidance with those care providers, and that is now available on the Digitising Social Care website. It has guidance around where you're using AI in direct care, also where you're using AI more for operational or administrative purposes, and top tips for things to think about, all linked back as well, of course, to our broader project on the responsible use of AI in social care.
This is something we've been asked for every time we talk about AI, which for you and I is pretty much daily. So brilliant that it's there. This is not a done job, I would say. If what you'll find in here, you want more, we are going to be working more on how to advise social care providers on good use, ethical use of AI, and that way continues. So do check it out. Let us know what you think. Let us know what you think is missing.
Yeah, brilliant. Thanks, Michelle. So finally, rapid fire updates from us. What are the quick notes on things that we might have missed in the world of tech?
Firstly, this week has been the, well, not this week, 2 weeks ago. God, where does time go? We had the wrap up of this year's DSPT year, and we hit a whopping 76%. So that means that 76% of the sector is now published with an up-to-date DSPT publication, which is huge. We have taken the sector such a long way around cybersecurity and data security. We talk about digitizing the sector. That is the first step. We have to get cybersecurity and data security right. And that means that most of the sector now is there, which is phenomenal.
Absolutely amazing. When I first started doing this, I think back in 2017 was the first time I came across the IG toolkit then, before it was ever the Data Security Protection Toolkit. There were 16 care homes, 16 in the whole country who had done this. So to get to 77% is just wild to me.
Yeah, I'm still scarred by the IG tool, in fairness. And then next we've got
the Data Use and Access Act. So this is a new piece of data protection legislation which has recently received royal assent. At the moment, there are some minor changes, which we've got a full briefing document on Digital Care Hub. We'll share in the show notes. We are waiting more information about implementation timelines. And once we know what those look like and when these changes will take effect, we obviously will be sharing that. We'll probably do a series of events and webinars specifically on what this means for the sector. But nothing to worry about right now, just so you're aware that has now got royal assent.
Yeah, again, anything that strengthens data and cybersecurity, I'm here for.
Yeah, exactly.
And then Windows 11, no more Windows 10, I guess, is the news. Mm-hmm. So if you are still working on Windows 10, get yourself moved. It does mean if you have older systems, you are likely to see that Windows 11 is not going to be compatible, but we are going to be launching some guidance on the Digital Social Care website to help you out. Digital Care Hub.
Yeah.
That was a while ago.
I know. Yeah, October is when it goes out of support. So you do have a little bit of time, but not too much.
And then last but not least, we mentioned at the top of the episode, today I learned that one of the biggest predators, one of the biggest adversaries to cybersecurity is actually squirrels. I know.
I can't believe this.
No, actual squirrels. We're not talking hackers. We're not talking ransomware or phishing or social engineering. We are talking actual squirrels chewing through wires is a huge cyber risk. And there's an entire website. So if you are interested, Google cyber squirrels and you'll see a map of the world where every time a squirrel or other animal, we're not maligning just the squirrels. There are also rats and rabbits and jellyfish, weirdly, on there. But where an animal has caused usually a large electrical outage, which has then had cyber implications. So there we go. I learned today that I have not spent enough of my cyber career focusing on the squirrel issue, but I'm going to rectify that from here on in.
Yeah, I genuinely am blown away by this news, and also can't believe squirrels are outdoing rats in this space. I just would have thought there was more rats worldwide that would be in the wiring, I guess.
Either that or the rats are playing a real game of
doing
blaming
really well.
The squirrels.
Yeah.
Could go, but...
Fair enough. Well, that, I think, wraps us up for our first ever episode of Control Plus Care. Next week, join us to do our deep dive on the NHS 10-year plan, what we think it'll mean for social care in terms of the technology that we're using, and everything else to do with digital.
Fabulous. So there we go. What does happen when the two most plugged-in people in digital care team up to demystify digital care? You get Control Plus Care. So
subscribe now on Spotify and YouTube.
We'll be back next Friday. Make sure that you tell a colleague, especially one who feels personally victimized by multi-factor authentication, that this is the place to be.